Oh, hello there. Welcome back to the James Show. I am your host, James Parker, News Talk 820 93.3 FM WBAP. If you have never called a radio show before, this may be the first one, because there's been an undercurrent argument that you've had thrown in your face probably your entire life. You can't be a Republican and a Christian at the same time. Well, it's kind of morphed into this new mutant thing. Well, you can't be MAGA and Christian at the same time. And look, it's been there and you've heard it before, but this complaint has gone absolutely volcanic in the face of the big, beautiful bill. Because, you know, if you're a Democrat, how do you argue against this bill? How do you say this is a bad bill? It continues almost all of the spending that y'all done for the last 4 years when your party had control of Congress and the White House. It doesn't make any drastic cuts. We're talking about $150 billion in cuts, most of that to USAID. And a couple of illegal immigrants are not going to get their food stamps. But it's not any giant cuts. In fact, there's more additional spending than cuts. So this is an increase in spending. This is a growth in the size of government. And you're getting, none of your principles are getting slashed over here unless you really wanted to have the tax rates go up at the end of the year. I mean, what is your complaint? Well, they got to find something to complain about. They can't say, well, Trump put through a bill that kind of aligns with our principles, so we better support it. No, they've got to come up with the reason. And the reason that the focus on this one is that people are going to die. People are going to suffer. You're slapping the foods out of little babies' mouths. And one angle of attack on this complaint just really rubs me the wrong way. And that's when they try and invoke religion. And they try and use your religious sensibilities against you or to make a political point. And I find this just so evil. And look, if you're not a believer, you're off the hook on this. You hold no account. But Christians who do this to other Christians, what's the matter with you? So one video that went viral over the weekend, millions of people have shared this out and seen it and discussed it. There's another one of these anti-MAGA preachers who's making the case here that you can't be Christian and MAGA at the same time. 800-288-9227 if you want to respond to this guy. I know this isn't important, like in the whole philosophical argument, but just so you know, this guy looks like exactly how he sounds. Looks like a little dweeb. Like he's 5'4", maybe 128 pounds. If he's going to do like bicep curls, he has to use like a pack of Twizzlers or something. That's all he can handle. Looks like he's never exercised a day in his life. It's exactly how he sounds. Just the most beta, weak little man you can find. And he's going to lecture you about being MAGA and Christian.
You know, I've been called an anti-MAGA preacher, and it's true. I am anti-MAGA. In fact, anyone who claims to be a Christian has to be anti-MAGA, or else you're not truly following the teachings of Jesus Christ. You cannot follow Jesus, who told us to welcome the stranger, while also advocating to close our borders to immigrants and refugees. You cannot follow Jesus, who told us to feed those who are hungry and give drink to those who are thirsty, while also advocating to cut programs that give food and drink to those who are hungry and thirsty. You cannot claim to follow Jesus, who went around and provided health care for free while also advocating for cuts to health care. You cannot claim to follow Jesus, who spent his entire life going around and teaching people while also cutting education. You cannot claim to follow Jesus, who spent his entire ministry giving hope to the poor while also advocating for an economic system that takes money from the poor and gives it to billionaires. Yes, I'm an anti-MAGA preacher because everything that claims to make America great again is bad for the kingdom of God, the reign of God on this earth. If you're a Christian, be anti-MAGA.
That's not a joke. That's not a parody. That's a real man saying words that I guess he believes that's true. And as far as I know, if it's a parody, you're supposed to mark it. And I've gotten it wrong before, but I think that's real. And so the first like great piece of evidence we have that Jesus isn't a socialist or wasn't a socialist is that he actually fed people. I love that joke, because a lot of people who've looked into this for more than 5 seconds and don't believe everything they hear on TV, that countries that lean real hard into socialism have a pretty strong pattern of starvation. They should write it into the textbooks. There's certain levels of socialism. There's like democratic socialism, and there's sort of like the Nordic model of socialism, or the UK before Margaret Thatcher, which was kind of like the halfway point. And then as you go down the spectrum, eventually you get to the level of socialism where people are starving, and then people break into the zoo to eat all the animals. But when Jesus fed 5,000, was it from private voluntary donations, or did he go get the Romans to tax people to make a government program and put these people on the dole and feed them that way? Is that what Jesus did? Because that's not what I remember. When he told the parable of the Good Samaritan found a guy who had been robbed and beaten on the side of the road, and he needed medical help. What'd the guy do? What did the Samaritan do? Well, he helped him. But he didn't say, stay put. I'm going to go get the Romans to pass a law forcing you to buy health insurance. That's not in my translation. Is that in the Septuagint? No, but we know Jesus isn't a socialist because he also actually taught people himself. When there was an education deficit that he noticed, he taught people himself. He instructed had the chat with the doctors and when they visited the temple when he was a kid. He instructed these other guys on how to go out and teach people in the way that he taught them. But what did he not do? He didn't go lobby the Romans to tax people to create the Ministry of Education or Department of Education or whatever Roman education equivalent would be. He didn't get government schools to teach people. He taught people. And so there's a dangerous conflation with supporting social programs being confused with actual charity, with actually supporting the poor and the sick and the uneducated. And the dangerous part of this charity argument, and the reason it works on some Christians, is there is an inherent emotional element that seems to turn people's brains off. So the accusation is that because you don't support these social programs, you want people to starve and die and be uneducated, or you want grandma on the street. Coming up, I'm gonna give you the great counter example of puppies to counter this claim that if you don't support all these social programs and you're not a good Christian. Boy, that is just really sick, to try and use the name of God to support your own political cause like this. This is what they talk about with using the Lord's name in vain, invoking people's pre-existing love of Jesus to say, well, this is what Jesus would have done. He would have voted my way. Yikes. Huge red flag. Huge red flag for me. 800-288-9227. Can you be MAGA and Christian at the same time? 800-288-9227. I'm James Parker. It's News Talk 820, 93.3 FM, WBAP. Hey there, welcome to the James Show, News Talk 820 and 93.3 FM, WBAP. In the wake of the big, beautiful bill, I'm not going to say it's an offensive criticism. It's absurd and definitely rubs me the wrong way, is this idea that if you want to make cuts to social programs, all of a sudden you're not a good Christian. Oh, you're going to take food away from starving kids. Oh, you're going to take health care away from old people. Stop it. The conflation of religion and internet, the exploitation of religion for your politics, that's a big no-no where I'm from. In my interpretation of how this is supposed to be adjudicated, that's kind of a sick move. You can't be a good Christian if you're MAGA. And I found a good guy to encapsulate it. For those of you just joining us, this is anti-MAGA preacher that went viral over the weekend. Millions of people shared this.
You know, I've been called an anti-MAGA preacher, and it's true. I am anti-MAGA. In fact, anyone who claims to be a Christian has to be anti-MAGA, or else you're not truly following the teachings of Jesus Christ.
Red flag.
You cannot follow Jesus.
Here, let's go and stop it right there. You will never hear me come on this show and say you can't be a good Christian and also follow any political ideology. I believe those things are two separate parts. It's the difference between your brain and your heart, your mind and your soul. I've never said you can't be a Marxist and still be a Christian, or you can't be a Democrat and still be a good Christian, or you can't be a supply side economist and still be a good Christian. What the heck kind of emotional blackmail is that? You're using your position as a minister of a church to make a political statement like that? That's a huge red flag. Would you have a problem if your preacher got this political?
Who told us to welcome the stranger while also advocating to close our borders to immigrants and refugees. You cannot follow Jesus, who told us to feed those who are hungry and give drink to those who are thirsty.
Yeah, I know. So if you want to cut all these social programs, you're evil. Got it. So let's get back to the philosophical argument here. And if you want to jump in, 800-288-9227, 800-288-9227. Because the danger here is when they sort of associate supporting social programs with actual charity, with the charity that Jesus described and he displayed and he acted out. So I want to use a counter example. I mean, it's kind of emotional, but it's not as life and death. So you can kind of detach, because everyone agrees that puppies are a good thing. And everyone agrees that children, if you want to have a puppy, a child getting a puppy, it's a cute thing. You probably have an emotional connection to that. You probably enjoyed getting a puppy and having a puppy when you were a kid. But you do recognize that out in the real world, not everyone has the same access to puppies. Rich people can get expensive designer puppies. They can get like a Goldie Poo or whatever they're called. And regular people like me, I just go to the pound, I'll get a mutt, or someone will have a litter of puppies on a farm. Anyone want a free mutt? And aside from, the getting them fixed and getting some shots and maybe some flea medication, it's pretty much anyone can get a mutt for basically a trifling sum. I mean, maybe not everyone can afford it, but the bar is pretty low. But let's say someone noticed that not everyone gets all the puppies they want whenever they want. And so they started a federal program for puppies, a federal puppy program, promising better access to puppies, cheaper, faster, better quality. But here you fast forward 50 years, puppies are 100 times more expensive. The quality of puppies is drastically worse. And for many places, there's a puppy waiting list, and it's gotten so expensive that if you do need a puppy, you probably need insurance to afford it. And now the government's mandating that you buy puppy insurance, whether you plan on getting a puppy or not. So now if you showed back up 50 years later after the puppy program was started and said, hey, we should repeal all the government interventions into the puppy market, return the puppy industry to the private sector, are you taking away anyone's puppies? Are you taking away anyone's access to puppies? They like to use that term, access to healthcare, access to education, or access to food. Or do you recognize that people of all socioeconomic classes are about to get their puppies cheaper, faster, and of higher quality? Because once you recognize this, welcome to free market capitalism. Thank you. You just made an economic conclusion that I was walking you into. And this lesson works for all industries and all markets, including charity. Charity's an industry. Maybe Jesus not promoting government programs or social programs. Maybe that's not an accident. Maybe he's right about economics too. What do you think? He's just some hack that forgot to mention we need food stamps? Did Jesus ever support any government program? It's been my observation, Jesus did not enjoy his experience being intertwined with government. So where does this put you? 800-288-9227. Can you be Christian and MAGA at the same time? This is Bobby in Irving. You're on WBAP. What do you think?
I think it's crazy if you go back to the Old Testament. This is talking to a man that's like trying to overcome anger so I don't go to hell. I'm not a preacher, but I've read the Bible, and I know that we was never supposed to have a king or government or anything. If you know that in the Old Testament, we was never supposed to have a leader. God was supposed to be our leader. And just long story short, I'm blown away that we actually have people saying that God made a mistake. He made a girl by an accident, and he made that boy by accident. And man, flesh and blood has a right to change that. And that is the most blasphemy, horrible thing I've ever heard, to see these guys competing against girls. And if you agree with Donald Trump, who said lying Hillary, and forget the name who he called out. He says they're liars. They're evil. So I guess we're supposed to accept evil, accept lies, and then speak blasphemy that the Creator, that I'm praying to every day just to get over my anger and get over my bad attitude. But now I'm all confused. I don't know. I was actually calling to get some help from you. Like, does God make mistakes? did he actually? He accidentally made a boy, and he's supposed to. This is insane. And as far as the expensive puppies go, you got to put doodle at the end of it. If it's labradoodle, whatever doodle, it's real expensive.
Yeah, you know what? Thank you very much. That would have been a better reference than the one I used. What I say, Goldie Poo or whatever. But well, I wouldn't say God made mistakes, but he does have factory seconds. You know, there are people out there who are born with some sort of shortcoming. You know, like one leg or whatever. But it's all part of the plan. I mean, it's not. It has nothing to do with social programs. It has nothing to do with whether or not we need to cut SNAP benefits. I mean, are we really? Look at the poorest among us and their relationship with food. It used to be, 150, all of human history till about 100 years ago. If you were the poorest among us and we had a food shortage, you would starve. Some of you would starve and die. It hadn't happened. Now the poorest among us are fatter than the people paying the taxes that cover their food stamps. Now their biggest problem is diabetes. They're getting too many calories too fast. So what? Giving them more access to cheaper free snacks, is that really helping them? For some of them, maybe not. But what do you think? 800-288-9227. 800-288-9227. I'm James Parker. It's News Talk 820, 93.3 FM, WBAP. Hey there, welcome to the James Show. I'm your host, James Parker, News Talk 820 and 93.3 FM, WBAP. In the wake of the big, beautiful bill making some much-needed cuts to government, you're getting the normal, the poor people are going to suffer. But it's kind of taken a troublesome turn here where they've amplified an argument that they've been trying to roll out on you for the last 9 years or so, and that's you can't be pro-MAGA and a good Christian at the same time. And this anti-MAGA preacher went viral over the weekend, and I'm just running it by you. Here's sort of the last 10 seconds of his rundown.
Yes, I'm an anti-MAGA preacher because everything that claims to make America great again is bad for the kingdom of God, the reign of God on this earth. If you're a Christian, be anti-MAGA.
Now, I find that absolutely absurd. Does anyone disagree with me on this one? Is anyone out there making the case? Because I know you'll send me an email. I know you people argue with me in the comment section on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and whatnot. Are you going to call in today? 800-288-9227. This is Shirley in Alliance on WBAP. Hey, Shirley.
Hey, I have a little different point of view maybe than this pastor does. And being a marketer for the largest Christian publisher in the world for 10 years, I can't even have time to go through the scripture with him. But anyway, here's something that happened during COVID, which exacerbated this issue. About 35% of our young people, millennials, childbearing, from about ages 18 to 35, moved back home. That's what they did. They moved, all right? They haven't moved out yet. Guess what happened when they moved back home? By the millions, and not an exaggeration, by the millions, they left their kids with grandparents, with sisters, with uncles, whoever they left them with. And guess where those food stamps are going? Not to those addresses. That's not where they go.
Oh, this is a
These
food
people
stamp
collect
thing.
Benefits for children. These people collect benefits for children who are not in their possession.
Yeah.
And they're doing it by the millions. And grandparents can't do anything about it. So, we talk about, he wants to protect people. He doesn't want to protect children if he's not willing to find the fraud in this system because it is just exorbitant. It is amazing what is out there. And people are left helpless to it. But he doesn't care about that, does he?
Well, no, I like the fact that you're going at that angle because I've always felt that charity being in the realm of government has sort of broken us in ways that most of us don't even recognize because that's been the norm for our entire life. For my entire life, food stamps has existed, Medicare, Medicaid. Now that's not the case for my parents. My parents are older than Medicare and food stamps.
Right.
And when they were born, did we have children that were just starving in the streets and dying? Were old people just homeless, living under bridges? No, actually, when you go back and you look at how we have disrupted society by offloading charity, our personal responsibility to be charitable, as Jesus described, into the hands of government, that we've taken part of our soul away because there's something that is sort of therapeutic, I should say, to your soul when you actually do acts of charity. And I don't mean acts of charity where you get credit for it or anything. It's sort of that anonymous thing that if you haven't done it, go do it and see if you feel a little bit different afterwards. I bet you're not as depressed. I bet you don't feel useless after that when poor or disabled or otherwise people depend on you.
I tell you what I do feel, though, when you get to know enough people and you do enough reading on the subject, you begin to realize we've almost trained a middle class to use charity. We're training the tech savvy to use it for sure. They're very smart, and some of these millennials especially very smart, and they know how to access these charitable things, and they feel nothing about it. There are tons of social studies written on this and political studies telling us that when things come out of a main pool and you and I collect from it, we do not feel anything about it. In fact, what we feel is that if we don't take it, someone else will get it. And why should I have it? That is the political science theory behind that's what we think.
Well, and that's one of the great descriptions of economics isn't really a study of money or a study of numbers. It's more a study of human behavior. Thank you very much, Shirley in Alliance. Coming up next, this sort of same strain of thought showed up on the Joe Rogan podcast where he had Bono, lead singer of U2, was on last Thursday or Friday, and they were talking about some cuts made to USAID on the claims that it's going to kill 300,000 people. Let's talk about that coming up next. Do you think charity should be the purview of government, or should we just cut all this and turn it back over to the private sector? 800-288-9227, 800-288-9227. I'm James Parker. It's News Talk 820 and 93.3 FM, WBAP. Hey there, welcome to the James Show. I'm your host, James Parker. It's News Talk 820, 93.3 FM, WBAP. Viral video of an anti-MAGA preacher says you can't be a Christian and support Trump at the same time. Can you be a Christian and MAGA at the same time? I think it's absurd to make that claim. 800-288-9227. Because this is coming up not only from the big, beautiful bill, but in the cuts to U.S. aid. A report came out that said 300,000 people have already died from the U.S. aid cuts. And I thought that was interesting. We're now responsible for everyone that's going hungry on planet Earth. And not only are we responsible for it, we have to do it through government. We couldn't do it through private voluntary donations. What about other countries? What about China? They don't have to pick up the slack. What about Russia? What about the UK? What about the country themselves? They're not responsible for feeding themselves. They don't have, steps that they can take like within their own borders to make sure that they have enough food. How come all these other countries can do it, but they can't? What's going on there? And I always find this insidious, this idea that if you're not for the government version, the socialized edition of charity, then you're not for charity, period. But here it is. It raised its head with the anti-MAGA preacher, but it also raised its head on the Joe Rogan podcast last week because Bono, lead singer of U2, was on making the case here. And, he's committed a chunk of his life to helping out poor people in Africa and whatnot. But here he was last week making a similar case.
Just recent report. It's not proven, but the surveillance enough suggests 300,000 people have already died from just this cut off, this hard cut of USAID. So there's food rotting in boats, in warehouses. You will not be happy. No American will, but there is, I think it's 50,000 tons of food that are stored in Djibouti, South Africa, Dubai, and wait for it, Houston, Texas. And that is rotting rather than going to Gaza, rather than going to Sudan, because the people who know the codes or for the warehouse are fired. They're gone. And so this, I don't know, what do you think?
Well, I'll tell you what I think. First off, that's not believable that there's food rotting in a warehouse in Houston because the guy who knows the code to get in got fired, and now it's just going to rot in there. We have no way of getting all the locksmith have just vanished, been raptured up to Jesus or something. No one knows how to open a door or poke a hole in a wall. It's just the food's going to sit in there. So that's not a believable scenario. Let's not make fun of him for that. I mean, the general thrust of his argument, we still need to address. Even if it is true, which probably not true. 300,000 people have already died from U.S. aid cuts. You mean there are people on the other side of the planet whose life is dependent on government taking money from you and giving it to them? Now, how long is this supposed to last? Did you adopt them? I didn't know I had dependents on the other side of the planet. I have a hard enough time paying for myself, Miss Parker, and our 4 children. Thank you very much. Is anyone going to send me some food or a check or something? No, all the air quotes charity just goes one way. I don't find that believable. And I know where the lie comes from. They're going to say that they were providing X amount of meals, which is keeping X amount of people alive. And then you cut that and they're just going to die. No, they're probably still going to get some food. They're probably going to take some money that they were spending elsewhere or some effort, some activity, and put that productive activity toward food. In fact, I'm not sure if anybody's going to die from famine. It's been a long time, pretty much depending on how old you are. For your entire life, the world has made more food than the people need to eat to stay alive. We produce far more calories than it takes to stay alive. So really, once we got rid of the mass spread of communism and Marxism in the 80s and early 90s, famines are a thing of the past. Famines are like if you have starving people, a lot of that is just from people who have access to food and someone is stopping them from getting it. So, and it's not you, it's not me. There's plenty of food aid to go around. There's plenty of charity to go around. There's plenty of good people on planet Earth who give privately, voluntarily, the more important part, to feed all the people. There's usually some corrupt government that's stopping it or that intercepts the U.S. aid packages and then sells them off and keeps the money. And so I contend with the fact, Bono, that if you cut off the free food coming from the American taxpayers, that these people are just going to naturally die. And if there is still a need for the U.S. citizens to put forward resources to make sure people on the other side of the planet don't die, then we're just going to have to do it from private voluntary donations. We're not going to have to do it through USAID anymore. Joe Rogan kind of pushed back, but in a way I thought it was a little inadequate. Listen to Rogan's response here.
We help the world. And when you're talking about making wells for people in the Congo to get fresh water, when you're talking about food and medicine to places that don't have access, like, no way that should have been cut out. And that should have been clear before they make these radical cuts. Like, there's got to be a way to keep aid and not have fraud. And you can't say we're going to kill everything so that there's no fraud. But then you're killing all the good, and you're doing it without letting anybody know it's going to happen. So it's not like they had 3 years to prepare. Let's build a new infrastructure. Let's make sure that everything's set up.
So now we're going to loop back into religion, because when we talk about how do we take care of these people who are in the third world, who do need food, they do need medical care, they do need to be educated. Well, when I talk about doing it through private voluntary donations, we're going to go back to 2014, and the Time Person of the Year, in 2014 was the Ebola doctors. If you look on the cover of it, 2014 Person of the Year, the Ebola fighters. Now, who are the Ebola fighters? Were they government bureaucrats? Were they doctors who were paid through USAID or some other government program? No, actually, it was a lot of people from Doctors Without Borders and Samaritan's Purse. The crazy part is Samaritan's Purse didn't get a whole lot of glow up from this. Christianity didn't get credit for this. Time didn't think it fit the narrative, so it was barely mentioned that it was Samaritan's Purse, and Samaritan's Purse was never identified as a Christian charity group. So really, the Person of the Year in 2014, the people who voluntarily took time and resources to go to the most dangerous part of the world where there's an Ebola outbreak and help the people who didn't have any money, didn't have any resources to compensate them with. It was all done through private voluntary donations. It was all done through private voluntary donations of doctors' times and resources of congregations from around the Christian world, not just America. Christians did that. And your Time Person of the Year should have been the Christian doctors and the Christian congregations that supported them and provided the resources. But when we have the blinding bias of the media narrative, the rest of the world doesn't get it. This is how you help people. This is how you more efficiently and more effectively help people in the third world if they need it, when they need it. And it just sprung up. Doctors went over there. We raised money for it. The problem was solved, and then it went away. If it was a government program, that problem would still be happening now. It would probably be even worse. There would be no incentive for Ebola to be cured. In fact, they would want Ebola to expand as much as possible so we can keep this gravy train rolling. But we didn't learn the lesson, primarily because the media just lied to your face, and they didn't want to give you credit. They didn't want to give Jesus credit. They didn't want to give Christians credit, because it makes their narrative look stupid. It makes their statish dreams look stupid. It makes USA look stupid. It makes government programs, health and human services, the VA look absolutely comical compared to how well private sector charity works, how well people acting out of their own Christian love for their fellow man actually worked better. Yeah, USA should be cut. All of it should be cut. SNAP should be cut. Public housing should be cut. Social Security, all this. Socialism fails, even in charity. When will we learn that lesson? 800-288-9227. 800-288-9227. More from Bono and Rogan next on The James Show. News Talk 820, 93.3 FM, WBAP. Hello, fellow Texans. Welcome back to the James Show. It's News Talk 820 93.3 FM, WBAP. I am your host, James Parker. Welcome back to the big show. Now, if you're just joining us, the whole first hour is going to be on the podcast. And if you enjoy this segment, you probably need to go back to the podcast later on and listen to the first hour, because I'm going to weave all of this together. We started off talking about this guy who calls himself an anti-MAGA preacher, who was making the case that you can't be MAGA and a good Christian at the same time, because, all of these cuts to poor people and food stamps and programs. And
I'm an anti-MAGA preacher because everything that claims to make America great again is bad for the kingdom of God, the reign of God on this earth. If you're a Christian, be anti-MAGA.
Yeah, it feels kind of icky when you mix politics in the pulpit like that, but he's out there saying it. And I was pushing back across this narrative that you've probably heard 1,000 times in your life, and it's real obvious. Jesus wasn't a socialist. He actually fed people. I mean, I love that joke. But never in the synoptic gospels did he call for a government program to help the poor. He said, you help the poor. He didn't call for the Good Samaritan to go pass a law to make sure the guy who got beaten and robbed and left on the side of the road to force him to buy health insurance. He actually gave him health care. He did private voluntary donations when he fed the 5,000. Private voluntary donations, not a government program. He didn't pass out food stamps at the Sermon of the Mount or in Capernaum or wherever the heck else he was feeding people and whatnot. So this shows up, though, in other instances that aren't explicitly religious. I was bringing the cut from Bono, the lead singer of U2, on Joe Rogan last week. USAID cuts, killing people. Same idea.
Recent report. It's not proven, but the surveillance enough suggests 300,000 people have already died from just this cut off, this hard cut.
So you get it. It doesn't have like the religious connotation, but the same idea. Well, if we don't help these people through force government programs, then people are going to die, and that's not good, or that's not Christian, or you're evil if you don't support this. You're a bad person. Look, the moral grandstanding is always icky from the political realm. But the study Bono's referencing, we know where that comes from. That number comes from Boston University. Had a study that was led by some lady named Brooke Nichols, but it's not based on hard data. She didn't go say, well, here's some excess deaths in the areas where USAID got cut off. She was just making a predictive model. Well, if we're sending this much money to this amount of people and it's feeding this many people, and then we cut them off, then this many people are going to die. It's just a guess. It's a bogus number completely. We have no evidence that anyone has died from a USAID cut. There's some people theorizing that it could have been happening. But I don't completely dismiss Bono. I don't think he's a very bright guy when it comes to economics or world affairs in many settings. But he has been right before. He's a guy that's gone down to Africa and other third world countries and tried to use his fortune. He's actually donated quite a bit of his money from what I've read, and tried and actually spent time down there and tried to understand it. And over the years, you get these little sound bites that kind of leak out, and he showed a little bit of promise there. Let's go to back to 2013. This is August 13th, 2013. Bono had to make a really hard admission that what helps the poor more than foreign aid is capitalism. Yes, Bono said this in 2013.
Rockstar preaches capitalism. Wow. Sometimes I hear myself and I just can't believe it. But commerce is real. That's what you're about here. It's real. Aid is just a stopgap. Commerce, entrepreneurial capitalism takes more people out of poverty than aid. Of course, we know that.
But yet here he is, 12 years later, saying cutting off aid is what's really hurting these people. What happened, Bono? Did you forget about that press conference? I didn't. Here he is in 2019. And he's not saying capitalism is good. I don't want to, go too far into the blasphemous territory of Team Blue here. He's not going to say it's not immoral, but it is amoral. Okay, I can kind of get with that. Here he is in 2019.
Capitalism is not immoral. It's amoral. It requires our instruction. Capitalism has taken more
people out of poverty than any other ism, but it is a wild beast, and if not tamed, it can chew up a lot of people along the way.
Yeah, but see, it's different because, I don't know, Trump is Hitler. How do they forget these lessons when it came out of his own mouth? You know what we really need over here to fix our education system? Bono's right. Capitalism. We don't need another government program. We don't need an expansion of existing public schools. We could start with school vouchers, but I'd rather scrap the whole damn thing. 800-288-9227. 800-288-9227. Coming up next, boy, there's been a lot of discussion around the Ukrainian drone attack on Russia, and rightfully so, because either the U.S. helped the Ukraine in their big drone attack, which is bad, or the U.S. knew nothing about Ukraine's big drone attack, which is worse. Foreign affairs analyst David Hamilton coming up next on The James Show. News Talk 820 and 93.3 FM, WBAP. Well, homeowners, we had some bad storms again over the weekend. And if they didn't wake you up on Sunday night, then you slept through what might be a pretty ruthless hailstorm. Now, I'm the kind of guy who can sleep through a hailstorm, so don't feel bad. But you might want to get your roof checked out, especially if you're in South Fort Worth or anything down below that. There was a lot of hail. There's sort of the Burleson area all the way across to Mansfield. Homeowners, if you have any doubt about the integrity of your roof, you need to go to blueribbondfw.com. Listen, that's what I did. I said, hey, why don't you come check out James Parker's roof? And they did. Came out there with the ladder, got up there. And we say it takes about an hour. I guess that's if you have like a huge house. My house is not that big, so 40 minutes tops. He was up there for 10 minutes, took a few pictures, came down, explained what he saw, and then went over this folder full of material that explains your options. If you need something to get patched or fixed, or if you need a whole new roof, the process. There's a lot of materials to help you out there. There's the different kind of shingles, the colors, the designs. It's all cool stuff, and we're not done with storms yet. A lot of you are getting rain right now if you're listening to the northwest part of our WBAP broadcast family. But next time you get some storms, you need to get your roof checked out. Have it done absolutely for free in the same way I did. Go to blueribbondfw.com. blueribbondfw.com. Hello, fellow Texans. Welcome back to the James Show. I'm your host, James Parker, and it's News Talk 820 93.3 FM WBAP. Well, now that we've shaken the dust off of a couple of drone attacks, there was a big attack that Russia did against Ukraine, and then you probably heard a little bit more about the big drone attack Ukraine did against Russia. Is this going to be an inflection point that turns us toward peace, or is this going to be an inflection point that turns us toward escalation, or is this not going to be an inflection point at all? My next guest is going to have some insights in that. My next guest, the great David Hamilton with the National Security and Economic Center at UNT. Welcome back to the James Show. You're our foreign affairs analyst here. Do you think this attack is going to be something that we remember in a year from now?
I think it's very meaningful. There were a couple of things that happened during this war that were turning points. One, early on, there was sort of a Red Dawn moment where a bunch of young kids with some snipers on ATVs and drones stopped the column of tanks coming through Belarus. And had that not happened, I think Russia would have taken over like many people thought. But they mired them down on a skinny road with a whole bunch of tanks, and they couldn't move. So that was a really pivotal point early on. Getting Starlink in there and having communications, that was critical. But the innovations that have come around in warfare with asymmetric warfare that we're seeing, this is a prime example. 117 drones go to 4 different places in Russia, as far north as the Luhansk area, the far northwest to Siberia, and they took out millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars worth of equipment using trucks and drones inside those trucks.
Well, I think a lot of us are wowed because you can take out someone's Air Force without having to have an Air Force of your own.
Yep, the world changed, and asymmetric warfare is much different now. The coordination that it took was really impressive with the trucks getting there, et cetera, and then being able to open them up and then having them attack. But there's videos of these drones doing their work, and we've seen this with tanks. But if you take out an AWAC, that's far more expensive than a tank. And if you take out a transcontinental bomber capable of shooting 22 cruise missiles, that's an even bigger David and Goliath moment.
What's an AWAC?
It's their surveillance radar planes that provide reconnaissance and
spy planes.
Tactical advantage. Spy planes, yeah. And those are expensive. So they took out 4 different kinds of planes, 40 plus of them using drones, and their success rate, they destroyed probably 1/3 of the Russia's capability with those kinds of planes. This is a good day for Zelensky and his team, and I do hope that it's a reflection point for the Russians, because they have been recently they've been very unwilling to negotiate, and they're negotiating from extreme positions, and they are attacking while they're in the middle of negotiations.
We're talking with David Hamilton, National Security Economic Center at UNT. I see both sides of the argument here where this could escalate things where Putin's going to be mad and he's going to do an even bigger counterattack, or this could the other argument is this could really affect the cost-benefit analysis of him continuing the war and bring him to the peace table. Which one do you think is the more likely scenario, David?
I'm very positive about this, and I could be a doom and gloom dire guy. I was worried more about the Germans and others providing Ukraine long-term, long-range attack capabilities that might actually damage civilian areas, hit Moscow and things like that, and that would have escalated things. But here we are taking up military assets. This is military on military, and it's degrading Russia's ability to put forward their war effort. So of how the Ukrainians could have gone about doing this was the best approach. They're prosecuting the war in a way that has the least likelihood, in my opinion, of escalating this into a World War III issue, because Russia is not in danger here. They're just not able to execute and prosecute their war the way they'd like to.
Well, I think a couple of observers should be concerned. Number one, how do you think China feels about this?
China has been using Russia as a surrogate, a puppet, to do what it wants to do and isn't willing to do itself.
Just to antagonize the West?
Antagonize the West, degrade our capabilities, distract us, because they are very interested in taking over the South China Sea. And they have imperialistic views on, they'd actually like to go all the way down to Australia, as their documents show. So they've been using this to distract us and to cause foment and discord within our own country, which is working. And I've said many, many times, we have to settle this war. We have to figure out a way for at least to be neutral with Russia. If they were an actual ally and did business with us, and we joined forces against our true mutual enemy, China, the world would be a much more stable place. And I think if Russia finally gets the sense that it's not going to be able to keep all of the territory that it's taken, it's going to have to withdraw, and there is a carrot for them, which is trade, we could end up in a world where America and Russia are not fighting each other through Ukraine, and we are all aligned against the one country in the world that really does want to take it over, which is China.
Well, also, my concern here is that there's some entities that are quite antagonistic toward the well-being of the United States, not just China, but like in Iran, or even smaller actors like terrorist groups. At some point, are they going to embrace or at least test out this drone technology? I mean, 9/11 is not going to happen again. They're not going to hijack any more planes and fly them into buildings. But are we going to have a terror attack with a drone swarm coming at us eventually?
This is absolutely the biggest concern. Imagine trucks like that coming somehow across the Canadian border, coming across on a tanker. We're able to do this sort of thing and attack downtown New York City or some other, the Super Bowl. And 100 drones hit the Super Bowl at one time. This is something we're going to have to be aware of and have countermeasures for. And this is a new arms race. This is a smaller, more nimble, cheaper arms race that is very, very hard to stop.
All right. Well, thanks for the heartburn there. This is David Hamilton from the National Security and Economic Center at UNT. Appreciate it, sir.
Thank you, sir.
All right, coming up next on the James Show, reparations is a hot topic again. See if you agree with the reparations program I would support, and it's probably not what you think. 800-288-9227, 800-288-9227. That's coming up on News Talk 820 and 93.3 FM WBAP. Hey there, welcome to the James Show, News Talk 820 FM, WBAP. I have no explanation on why this has been so popular over the last couple of weeks, but you may have noticed on your social media timelines too, reparations keeps coming up and keeps coming up. And there's people that are just private folks making their own videos, just, singular individuals. But then there's also people with TV shows who are talking about it. Let me give you a couple examples here. First, a viral video of a woman who's making the case on why she wants race-based reparations.
Until I get my reparations, I'm done caring about anybody else's issues, y'all. Like, I'm sorry, I don't care about nothing anybody else got going on because y'all don't care about me getting reparations, so why the should I give a about y'all problems? I don't care no more. I really don't. Until things are made right, I do not care about what y'all got going on.
Yeah, I kind of assumed you weren't worried about my problems anyway. You shouldn't be. You shouldn't. I have my own set of issues going on. I hope that doesn't burden you at all, whether or not you get reparations. And even if you did care, I don't think it would help. You can't even take care of yourself. I'm just assuming that. I take that last part back. Don Lemon has his own little show where he had a woman named Hillary Fordwich, who sounds British to me, and he brought up the idea of reparations to her. This is what I'm talking about. This keeps coming up over and over the last couple of weeks, so I just wanted to address it here. Don Lemon.
Who are asking for reparations for colonialism, and they're wondering, $100 billion, $24 billion here and there, $500 million there. Some people want to be paid back, and members of the public are wondering, why are we suffering when you are, you have all of this vast wealth? Those are legitimate concerns.
Well, I think you're right about reparations in terms of if people want it, though, what they need to do is you always need to go back to the beginning of a supply chain. Where was the beginning of the supply chain? That was in Africa. And when across the entire world, when the slavery was taking place, which was the first nation in the world that abolished slavery? The first nation in the world to abolish it. It was started by William Wilberforce, was the British. In Great Britain, they abolished slavery. 2,000 naval men died on the high seas trying to stop slavery. Why? Because the African kings were rounding up their own people. They had them on cages waiting in the beaches. No one was running into Africa to get them. And I think you're totally right. If reparations need to be paid, we need to go right back to the beginning of that supply chain and say, who was rounding up their own people and having them handcuffed in cages? Absolutely. That's where they should start. And maybe, I don't know, the descendants of those families where they died in the high seas trying to stop the slavery, that those families should receive something too, I think, at the same time.
It's an interesting discussion, Hillary. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm sure he was out of time there, but she totally flipped the script on him. Wasn't that sweet? Now, I am against reparations in most of the ways it has been proposed, but I am not against all reparations. There is a way you could structure the program in which I would be in favor of it. Because the number one problem with the reparations that I see proposed is you're taking money from people who never owned slaves and you're giving it to people who never were slaves. In a lot of instances, you're taking it from people who not only did they never own slaves, their family fought and they had family members die fighting to free the slaves. So why should they be punished for the sins of the people they were literally fighting against, the people who were shooting at them? And then also, it's just so hard to figure out who should get them. You can't just say, well, all black Americans should get reparations. Really? What if your family immigrated here after the Civil War and they were therefore never in the lineage of slaveholders? Like a Barack Obama is a good example. His dad's from Kenya. It was never involved in American slavery, but he actually did have some relatives, obviously on his mom's side, going back to the Kansas days, that actually were participating in slavery. So, how do you work that out? And even people like the great Sunny Hostin from The View, we find out when she goes on the Skip Gates show that she's actually descended from slave traders. Do you know that?
Wow. I'm a little bit in shock. I just always thought of myself as Puerto Rican, half Puerto Rican. I didn't think I was, my family was originally from Spain and slaveholders.
Yeah. So how are you feeling?
Yeah. How does that feel? Even LeVar Burton, the guy who played Kunta Kinte himself, the younger one. John Mooney was the older Kunta in Roots. LeVar Burton has the stain of white people in his lineage.
You are looking at your great-great-grandfather, James Henry Dixon.
James.
It's difficult to make out, but that is your biological great-great-grandfather.
Now, I'd have fought you 5 minutes ago if you told me that I had a white great-great-grandfather.
You do. You can fight me, but it's the truth. And ain't nothing you can do about it.
What? Kunta got white ancestry.
That's right.
See, so we're a little more mixed up and familial than a lot of people like to pretend. But let me give you the short version of the reparations I would support. You say you wouldn't support that. What would you support, James? Well, the federal government owns 31% of the land in the United States. Go Google it. The original reparations was 40 acres and a mule. No one wants a mule anymore. But what about the 40 acres? You know, if we took all the land that the federal government's not supposed to own anyway, Constitution is pretty explicit in that, and we made good on the promise, then you solve a lot of these problems. Then you're not taking money from people who were never slaveholders or even supported slavery and giving it to people who were never slaves and maybe mixed up with slaveholders in their lineage. This is land that the government's not supposed to have anyway. The only people that's hurt by this is the federal government. And it is a much better base of wealth building, especially generational wealth, than a one-time check for $9,000 or $100,000. That could all be squandered within 3 months or whatever. But land, that's something that your kids and grandkids can live on. We'll give you a total tax abatement for what, a generation or two? What do you think about that? What do you think of divvying up the land to call that reparations and then just be done with it? 800-288-9227, 800-288-9227. I'll give you the good and bad on the T-chart of my reparations next on The James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, 93.3 FM, also WBAP. Hey there, welcome to the James Show. I am your host, James Parker, News Talk 820, 93.3 FM, WBAP. I don't know where this came from, but reparations is a hot topic again. It keeps coming up on different shows, cable news and social media podcasts and X feeds and Facebook posts. And I just want to get ahead of this because I actually do have a reparations program that I think a lot of people would be a little more open-minded to than just the idea of, hey, give me some free stuff. And that's the fact that the federal government, it's pretty explicit in the Constitution. The federal government's only supposed to own the lands that it needs to operate. So, you know, like where the Capitol building is and the White House and whatever office buildings they own and like military bases and embassies, things like that. They're not supposed to own 89% of Nevada, but they do. They're not supposed to own pretty much the eastern half of Oregon, but they do. 80-something% of Utah, but they do. And it turns out if you do want to do some quick math, if you take all the federal lands away from the big government in D.C. and you start divvying up, hopefully to get to the 40 acres part of the 40 acres and a mule, and you use that for reparations, here, you can have this plot of land. We'll give it to you tax-free for a generation. I would say 2 generations to be generous, but I'm soft pedaling it to see if I can get you on board. Because what's the negative consequences to anybody else? What's the negative consequences to you? Nothing. What's the positive consequences? Well, I can think of a lot of positive consequences. 800-288-9227. But the positive consequences, number one, land ownership is a good thing. It's a good base to build generational wealth. You can hang on to it. You can live on it. And if you have your own land and you don't have any property taxes, then you can literally live rent-free. That's the dream. Is there a better way to build wealth than taking away the biggest expense most of us have every month? Another way is that this will so much realign the diaspora that's unusually concentrated in urban areas and disperse them out. And once they get out of urban areas, once they get out of this bubble and they actually have land that they have to take care of, they have to be good stewards of it. They have to mow, they have to go to Home Depot and get a riding lawnmower and whatnot. That's just not something that's experienced by people who live stacked on top of each other in these giant buildings in a downtown area or in a major metropolitan area. It's a totally different lived experience, and it would probably pull them a little to the right wing of the political ideology. There's a reason why rural areas are far more Republican than urban areas. It's a different lived experience, to borrow their term. But also it's going to be good and for reparations in the fact that some people are going to be in oil patches and have mineral rights and just get blindingly rich off of it. But also it'll turn people into givers, not takers. You're off the grid. You're out of the system. You're no longer dependent on public housing or Section 8 because we're going to get rid of all that with the reparations. But also think about this big demographic switch means almost all big cities are going to go Republican. If they're losing their strongest, most strident voter demographic for the Democrats, then what happens? Well, Fort Worth is going to be solid Republican. If you had a big chunk of our black neighbors move out of Dallas, what does the voting base look like then? Does Dallas go Republican? Think of all these big cities. How would that change? Hell, Chicago might go Republican. 800-288-9227. I can't think of a whole lot of downsides because the government's not supposed to have that land to begin with. 800-288-9227. This is Brandy in Richardson. You're on WBAP. Go.
Hey, James, are you going to limit it to just African Americans? Or are we going to include Native Americans?
No, I don't think I'm going to include Native Americans. They have their tribal lands, and that's sort of a similar deal. Although I don't like that issue the way it stands now. That's not going to be part of my reparations plan.
Okay, well, in that case, I would like reparations from all the idiots that voted for Biden.
Yeah, that's not really going to happen. I don't think we can do that. Generally speaking, are you for it or against it?
I think it would be a big waste. I think that they would squander it, sell it to some developer, and piddle away the money.
Well, some would, but I imagine a lot of them would do the right thing and they would be rewarded for it. And if they want to be foolish with it, that's their right. They can go ahead and, burn it to the ground and move on, and they have no more complaints here. I don't want to hear about it. We already gave you reparations. What'd you do with your land? Oh, you squandered it. Well, then that's on you. And so now I think the collective guilt goes away. This is Ann in Waco. You're on WBAP. What do you think about the reparations plan?
Well, I think it could be a good plan, but I have a little bit of adjustment to that. I don't think it should be 40 acres. It should be something, but when does it start and when does it end? Because since the dawn of time and people want to conquer one another, there's always been an indentured servant or a slave population. But what if we divided it out? What about every American that served our country that is in need of a home or space? Why don't they get something?
Because they were never enslaved.
Well, they should get something for serving America.
Well, they got a paycheck and they get the GI Bill and they get VA benefits. We already do a lot. And if you want to go get a mortgage, you can go get a mortgage that we have to subsidize and you don't have to put any money down. There's already programs for veterans. We don't have to squeeze them into reparations. Well, let's not try and squeeze other people in here, whether it's Indians or veterans. Let's just focus on a group of people who did have a different experience. Veterans were never enslaved. Indians weren't enslaved in the same way that African Americans were enslaved. I like your attempt there, Ann. Thank you for working with me. Let's go to Ken in Arlington. You're on WBAP. Your thoughts on my reparations plan?
I don't think any registered Republican should have to pay reparations.
Well, we don't have to pay it at all.
Well, we freed the slaves. The Democrats didn't.
I stepped on a very good line, a very good point you're making. Yeah, and that's one of the problems with the reparations check. You have some people. I have a very complex family. I've done my lineage, and I have people from both from my family line that fought on both the Confederate and the Union side. So, how would you deal with me? But yeah, no, you're making a good point. There's other families out there, white families, who had family members go out and die fighting to free the slaves, and you're going to take money from them? You're going to punish them? Yeah, so that's a great argument against the reparations check, but what about my reparations land allotment, Ken?
No, because I think once you give them the land, then you're going to have to give them the lawnmower to cut the grass. Then you're going to have to give them the tractor to farm the land. Then you're going to have to give them the animals to produce the food that they want to eat.
Absolutely not. No. You don't get a tractor. You don't get anything else. You get the land, and we'll just call it even after that.
Oh, I guess so. Just give them the land. Just as long as there's no mineral rights on it.
No, give them the mineral rights. Why are you so chintzy, Ken? It's land that we're doing nothing with, and it's like most of Utah, and it's most of Nevada, and it's a big chunk of Idaho and Montana and Arizona. I can hear you being open-minded about it, though, so I really appreciate that. But what do you think? 800-288-9227. 800-288-9227. More response on the James Show Reparations Land Grant program coming up next on News Talk 820, 93.3 FM, WBAP. Hey there, fellow Texans. Welcome back to the James Show. I'm James Parker. It's News Talk 820 and 93.3 FM WBAP. Welcome back to the big show. So reparations is a hot topic again. I don't know if you've seen the influx of viral videos. Every once in a while, I check out trends, whether what's trending on X or what's Google Trends and whatnot. And reparations has popped up over the last couple of weeks. I've been trying to ignore it, but then, there's a couple of extra sound bites that popped up. It was on Don Lemon's show and Sonny Hostin on The View and all. It keeps getting mentioned over and over, so I thought we'd address it because I actually have one reparations plan I would support. Now, it's not the one that most people are throwing out there. Most of the time when you hear people, I want reparations, they mean I want a check. I want a check from the government. I want the government to take money from other people and give it to me. The only question is, how big is the check going to be? Or is it a one-time thing? Or is it going to be a monthly thing? Or no, that's not my plan at all on the James Show. Our reparations plan is simple. You take the 31% of the land in America that is owned by the federal government, and you divvy it up from the people who are descended from slaves. That's it. It's pretty close to the 40 acres and a mule. I mean, if you really need a mule, maybe we could talk about that later. But I think the land's the more important part. And we could probably give them each something close to 40 acres. And I don't see any downside to this. Like over here on the social media comments, Smacky said, it's an awful idea, but great rage bait. How is it awful? What's the downside to this? Because this doesn't cost anybody anything. The only person that's going to be punished isn't the fellow taxpayers, just the federal government, and they're going to be absolved of the land that constitutionally they shouldn't have anyway. So I see nothing but upside to this. And then all the other programs go away. All the other affirmative action or DEI or whatever we're calling it these days, where you just discriminate against people like me, that stops. We just stop the whole discrimination game together. We call it even, and we move forward as one country after that. Cleo in Plano, you're on WBAP. Your thoughts on my reparations plan?
Okay, well, I want to know is how do we know who's going to be black enough to get this? And the way I'm going from this is, because you know me, James, I'm half black, half white. Are we going to be going back to the one drop rule? Is that what they're going to do? Say, oh, well, you're only 30% black, but, your ancestors said from your genealogy that they were from the slave colony, but you still get land. I mean, how are they going to do that?
These are great questions because there is a little bit of gray area because I'm not really settled on that. When you go and you try and get like a student loan or qualify for some of these scholarship programs, usually they have, I don't know what the rule is. It's kind of like the half and half rule. Maybe we can call it the Cleo rule. But if you're more than half, if you're half black, that's what it takes to qualify for the black scholarships. When I was applying in college. So if one of your parents was black, you were in. If both of your parents were half black, if they were both Cleos, you're in. But more or less than that is you're just falling either off the category or into the category. So it could be the half rule. I also like the idea that even if you break the half rule, but one of your white descendants was a slave owner or one of your black descendants was a slave owner, I think that should disqualify you. So Sonny Hostin, while she is half black, wouldn't qualify because on the Puerto Rican side of her family, some of her descendants actually owned slaves. So she would be disqualified.
And that's what I mean. That's the rub of it. How do we know?
Well, if they can find out for Skip Gates' show on PBS, what was it called? Finding Your Roots or Discovering Your Roots or whatever. Yes. We'll just get Skip to do it all. Apparently, we have the ability, the tools at our disposal to do it for LeVar Burton from Reading Rainbow. Certainly, we can do it for my James Show reparations program. But those are good questions, and I don't have them all worked out, Cleo.
Thank you, James. I just thought I could bring that up.
That's good. Henry McKinney, you're on WBAP. Go.
All right, thanks. I'll make my comment and then I'll hang up and hear what you got to say.
Sure.
First of all, I'm not a fan of reparations, period. I don't believe the federal government has a right to give away a land they're not supposed to own. And wouldn't the states be next in line for that land after that?
Well, here's a little secret of the pros. Go ahead and hang up and I'll talk on that. He's right. They should be next in line. But also, I feel like the state government shouldn't have excess land except for the buildings that they're on. James, what about state parks? Man, I'm kind of iffy on state parks, actually. So y'all might want to tap the brakes on, well, what about national parks? Forget the national parks. That's not supposed to be a thing. The Constitution was pretty clear about that. So, no, they're not supposed to give away land they're not supposed to have. I don't know if there is a supposed to. They're already not supposed to have that land. So how do we decide how they give it up? Sell it back into commerce? I mean, that's one way, but then they would be profiting off of it. And so I kind of like the government getting stiffed by just giving it away. This is Tim and Sherman. You're on WBAP. Your thoughts on reparations. Go.
Afternoon, brother. There's a lot of math to be done in these equations.
Yes.
So if there's a reparation amount figured out, is there an offset? Just say the folks have been on welfare for X amount of years. Say they're third generation welfare, fifth generation. Who knows? Is there an offset there?
No, I'm willing to overlook all that. Those were mistakes. Those were payments that I didn't support. I didn't like any of those programs my entire life. I have never been a fan of those. But I am going to be so magnanimous, I'm not going to hold it against them. No, go ahead.
Plays were released. Had to have been some paperwork in place. What was the problem? Because you read my mail earlier with the 40 acres and the mule. I mean, 40 acres these days could get you anywhere between $40,000 to $2.5 million.
Well, yeah, but they can't all sell at the same time. You'd flood the market. The price would fall out the bottom. And plus, how many people are going to want, distant land in the Utah hinterlands like that? So, I mean,
1 acre and a buck tussle Shetland pony. Final offer. Appreciate you.
Well, he won me over with the Shetland pony. Shetland pony. What are you going to do with that? That's hilarious. You guys are cracking me up. We'll continue talking about reparations. It's a hot topic. I have the solution. I'm just trying to get people on board. What do you think about parceling out the land? And by the way, the original 40 acres and a mule, that was the deal that they were supposed to get. I'm trying to make that promise whole. But guess who stood in the way and didn't actually follow through with that? Was that the Republicans who were in positions of power? Or I don't know. We may never know. 800-288-9227. I'm James Parker on News Talk 820 and 93.3 FM WBAP. Hey there, welcome to the James Show, News Talk 820, 93.3 FM, WBAP. If you're just joining us, we're talking about reparations. I didn't bring it up. I'm just responding to something that's been trending on social media. Probably like 4 days out of the last 2 weeks, I've seen it in the list. Then I keep seeing sound bites from different TV shows, and I have my own plan. I don't want to take money from the taxpayers and give out a check. That's not going to solve anything. That's something that could be just be easily squandered and have no lasting effect a year from now. But if you divvied up the land that the federal government's not supposed to have, I don't know if you realize this, but the federal government owns 31% of the land in the United States of America. They're not supposed to have that. So we need to return this to the people, and I think a great way to do that would be to divvy it up among people who are descended from the American slavery system, and we'll call that reparations. We'll give them a tax abatement for what, a generation, 2 generations? I don't care. And I think that's nothing but upside. You know, you take people from taking in the system to providing into the system. There's going to be a level of self-sufficiency that kind of goes along with it. And when you become a landowner, when you own actually a rectangle of America, well, then you're not disenfranchised. You are part of America. And I think it would be great for, integrating us into the whole melting pot idea again. It would solve so many problems with like crowding in the cities and traffic and bad neighborhoods and other economic issues. I see nothing but upside. What say you? 800-288-9227. This is Steve in Denton on WBAP. Go.
First of all, let me preface this by telling you, I am the child of a lady who was an orphan from age 3 to age 16. She lived in a convent. At 16, told to get on the streets. My father was so dirt poor, he sold food to fishermen in the morning so his family could eat in the evening. I understand poverty. Before I got to high school, they owned 3 businesses. They never took a dime of federal assistance. They never owed anybody anything. They paid for everything raising their family. Reparations, number 1, equitable relief requires you never create an unjust enrichment. Currently, I know of nobody alive today who was a slave. And the poverty you see today is not because of slavery. It's because of vagrancy. People who choose a lifestyle which perpetuates poverty. It's in my race and all other races. Nobody makes these guys father 10, 15 children from different women and never stay to raise one of them. Nobody makes these women go get pregnant from 5 or 6, 8, 9, 10 different men and never marry because that way they can get their check. The poverty problem we have today is because of life choices with very, very few exceptions. And those exceptions would be the people who are actually physically ill, critically ill, and because of situations beyond their capacity to control, they're in poverty. Those people need to be helped. The rest of them need to stop their stupidity and get a job and stop fathering kids and stop having kids out of wedlock who are going to be living in poverty because of your choices. That's the problem. You're creating an unjust enrichment for people who are in the situation they're in because of their own life choices.
Yeah, but okay, so would you take my land grant program if we, in turn, got rid of all these other social programs?
No, we need to get rid of the other social programs too.
So you don't like either one?
You don't create an unjust enrichment.
How is this an unjust enrichment?
Because they're not in poverty today because of slavery.
I know, but
they're in poverty today because of their own life choices. You are rewarding.
Yeah, but here's the deal.
You are rewarding.
If it's unjust, who's the victim here? We're not taking money from you and giving it to them. In that case, that's not just to the people you're taking money from. But this is a victimless crime. If you're doling out land, who is hurt by this? Who is being aggrieved by this? Everybody
else who is working for what they own has to sit back and watch these people get an entitlement.
Okay, but this doesn't affect the land grant won't affect any of those people. It won't have any effect on me or you.
They will lose their economic position to people who will sell their land because they have no choice.
Well, then that's on them.
They have no desire to go live out in the country for the most part. They want to live in the city.
Well, they would prefer if they don't have to pay property taxes or rent. They could pretty much live for free. They just have to get some sort of shelter going.
You are hurting everybody.
I'm not hurting anybody. I'm not hurting one person.
You are, sir.
How?
You're changing the economic advantage that people have worked for by giving other people a free economic advantage.
So,
and they're not entitled
if
to
one
it.
of your neighbors takes this deal and they go move to northern Arizona to live on their 40 acres, how does that affect you at all?
It affects the people in Arizona, sir. It
Okay.
affects their property
All right,
value.
I'm going to take some more calls. You're making some points. I see what you're saying. Not saying I agree, but you did well. Thank you, Stephen Denton. This is Jeanette in Paradise. You're on the James Show on WBAP.
Yes, sir. I don't agree with reparations at all. I'm pretty much in the same line as your previous caller.
Steve.
Steve, yes. But, if I were to, to open my mind to it, where would you begin? Because my grandfather was basically a child slave. He was given to a family to work on the farm, and then you've got that throughout.
Yeah, so I would start with the descendants.
What about people what about victims of child trafficking? Or
Okay.
human trafficking?
So I guess you're new to the conversation. We covered this about 3 segments ago. We're not going to lump in everyone who has grievance into the reparations program. I realize Native Americans.
So your plan is based on black and white.
My plan is based on the descendants of American slavery, and those at some point in Reconstruction they were promised 40 acres and a mule, and I'm trying to make good on that promise. That's not to discount the suffering of your grandfather or people who were in child sex trafficking or Native Americans or any other people who have like a club foot or they're left-handed or whatever. That I realize there's other people with other issues. We're just dealing with this one, and so that's the focus. That's the onus. Just the people who are direct descendants from Black American chattel slavery. 800-288-9227, 800-288-9227. Also, you're disqualified if one of your descendants own slaves. So like a Sonny Hostin or a Barack Obama, they're disqualified. Got it? I'm just out of time. 800-288-9227. I'm James Parker, News Talk 820, 93.3 FM WBAP. Dan Bongino. Yeah, I know. Welcome to the James Show. I'm your host, James Parker, News Talk 820, 93.3 FM, WBAP. We got a hot one here. If you're just joining us, reparations has been floating around your social media feed a lot in the last couple of weeks, and it keeps getting boosted because they keep talking about it on different shows, and people are claiming that they want it and they need it, and it's something unjust. And okay, so here's where I am okay with reparations. First off, pretty much none of the bills or ideas or programs that have been floated on any of these programs has been something I agree with. So generally speaking, no, I don't agree with reparations. However, I agree with the original intent of reparations, the whole 40 acre and a mule part. Actually, the part that they got right was the land ownership. That was the beginning of the American dream, owning your own plot of land, not having a landlord, not having a lord over you, you being the landlord. And if you've ever bought a house, you know, just that little square of dirt is the beginning of what could be generational wealth. Because when you pay rent for years and years and years, whenever you move, you don't get to take any of that money with you. If you do ever sell that land or move, you can take some of that equity with you. And then on top of that, if you don't want to move, you have a place to stay and it's paid off and it's good to go. And that could be your foundational support to where even if you get a low-wage job without the biggest expense that you have right now, that could climb you out of the hole up to middle class or maybe even upper middle class or maybe even upper class. So the way I want to do it, 40 acres. We have the federal government owns 31% of the land in the United States. They shouldn't own that. Constitution says they should only own that which it takes to administrate the government. So the buildings that their office is on, maybe some naval bases here and there, a lighthouse, who knows? But the rest of that, let's divvy it up. 800-288-9227. Eddie Weatherford, you're on WBAP. Go.
Yes, sir. It's not a good idea to me at all.
Why?
Well, I'm 75 years old, and I've worked hard all my life with black people a lot. And, man, I've seen men move in with women just long enough to get them pregnant and move right back out.
Okay. What does this have to do with my reparations program?
The deal is, why should they, after all these generations, get anything free? They've had plenty of time to work just like I have.
Well, it's making good on a promise that they had. It's righting a wrong that is a stain on our nation's history, even though it's an institution that is shared by every civilization going back to the dinosaurs. But it's also, I think the beauty of this is it doesn't cost you anything. There's no victim here. We're not taking anything from anyone and giving it to someone else. The only person who's going to be punished by this or experience negative consequences from this is the federal government themselves.
Wait a minute. You're saying negative government. The government doesn't have any money. That money belongs to the people of the United States.
Right, and that's why
it's not rich.
I know. That's why I'm not giving them money. I'm giving them land.
That's still part of our land.
No, that's not our land.
That's given away. Yes, it is.
Go stand on it and tell me how long it's your land before you get arrested for trespassing.
The government runs it, and they're not going to let you own it. But I guarantee you it belongs to the people of the United States of America.
No, go build something on it. If you own it, go try and build something on it. Go try and drill for oil on it. You don't own that. The federal government owns it. They shouldn't own it. I don't believe in collective ownership because I'm not a collectivist, and I'm part of the Enlightenment Western civilization idea of private property and individual rights. So no, I reject the whole. That's our land. Oh really? You get a cut of the profits whenever they drill for oil on federal land? Because I don't either. Kent Garland, you're on WBAP. Go.
Hi, James. Yeah, I've given some thought to this 40 acres and a mule
and
thing.
It's brilliant, isn't it?
150 years ago, when they gave you 40 acres, it was probably raw land on the frontier. No house, no roads, no utilities. The nearest neighbor's a mile away. The nearest store is an all-day trip.
Yeah.
But if you work like a dog every day, you could survive, and after 4 or 5 years of that, you might actually have a little log cabin and get to the point where you were sort of comfortable.
Amen.
So in other words, 40 acres and a mule means we'll give you just enough support so you don't survive if you work really hard. And we already have that. Between the welfare and the food stamps and all the other government assistance programs, we've already given people a lot more value than they would have gotten.
And
from
it
that
didn't
40 acres
work.
and a
Giving them
mule.
money didn't work, but giving them the tools to build wealth themselves. Can we at least try that before we condemn it?
Well, are you going to put a house on that 40 acres?
They can.
You're going to give them that too?
Well, look, they can go, if they want to go get like a shed from Home Depot to get a starter house, and then they can go work and save up some money to get the next bigger house, and then maybe build finally their for real house or a log cabin, or they can build it themselves, or they can do what the Amish do, and 800 of them get together and have a barn raising in a day. I don't know what they're going to do. There's probably going to be 1,000 different angles to it, and I'm not going to pretend like I know the answers on which one knows best, but the process by which they figure it out is also the process by which they figure out how to be self-sufficient. And food stamps and public housing and all these other social programs have done the opposite. It's turned them in, it's infantilized them. It's turned them into perpetual children and just wards of the state. And I think that's what the beauty of land is. It's not a handout, it's a hand up.
Well, you make some good points. I'll give you credit for being creative. And I will also point out, I think the last caller had a good, you can't just, I mean, if that land doesn't belong to the federal government, then it must belong to somebody. It doesn't seem right for them to just hand it out to people.
Well, no, I don't want them to take anyone else's land and give it to them, but the federal government owns 31% of the land mass available in the United States, and they're not supposed to.
Consider this. I have heard that if they were to sell that land, they could make so much money they could wipe out the national debt. And that might be a better thing to do with it in the long run.
Yeah, you know what? That's a pretty good counter argument there, Kent. I appreciate it. No more time here, but we got a lot of good calls. So stick around if these guys hang out. We got 4 more good calls on the James Show reparations plan. Oh no, I don't want anyone to get a check. I want them to get land. 40 acres. That's what you get. 800-288-9227. I'm James Parker. It's News Talk 820 93.3 FM WBAP. Hey there, welcome back to the James Show. I'm James Parker, News Talk 820, 93.3 FM WBAP. For those of you who are looking up at the sky and it's looking kind of gray whenever there's bad weather, remember WBAP is your home for severe weather. If you need to know what's going on, just turn us on and we'll keep you covered on that, even outside the James Show. Right now we're talking about my reparations plan. It's been a hot topic, but I don't like the idea of taking money from one person and giving it to another person. I like the idea of taking the 31% of land in America that the federal government owns that they're not supposed to control, according to the Constitution, and divvying it up. Kind of like the 40 acres in a mule, but however the math works out, let's give them some land. Let's give them a hand up, not a handout. And I really can't see the downside to that. I can see a lot of upside. I mean, think of what would happen to public schools in densely populated big cities. What would happen to crime? What would happen to traffic and congestion? What would happen to what's the negative consequences to people who aren't part of this program? Pretty much nothing. So it looks like all upside to me. What do you think? And guys, go kind of quick. I want to try and get in as many people as I can here. David in Fort Worth, go.
I think you're on a good idea compared to most I've heard, but I think you have only gone halfway. And here's what I'm saying. I believe reparations, there was an offense, and that was slavery in your topic today.
Yes.
The people that lost all they had or lost drastically from slavery were, one, the slaves, and it should include everyone that died and lost all they had fighting for their freedom. And I think that's the only way to be fair if there was reparations.
Yeah.
And
so you're saying,
I really believe that.
So you're saying you should get a land grant if you're shown to be a descendant of someone who was enslaved or someone who died fighting for the Union in the Civil War?
Absolutely.
That's interesting. I don't know if we have enough.
Fair.
I mean, kind of. They were never enslaved, and they were never promised 40 acres and a mule, and their families all got, the pensions that they were entitled to. If you were a guy who died for the Union in the Civil War and you had a surviving family, they got a pension. I know this because I have a great grandfather who died in World War I, and my grandmother was raised on his $50 pension until she was 18 or whatever. So I don't know. That's something to consider. If we have enough land to go around, maybe we'll talk about it then. But we'll take care of the people who are descendants of the actual enslaved first, and then maybe move up to descendants of those who perished for the Union. Mark Benbrook, you're on WBAP. Go.
Thank you for taking my call. I agree with Steve and some of your previous callers that we don't know, there's no way to know that the descendants of slaves are in the state they're in because of the fact that their ancestors were slaves.
Oh,
and the
agreed.
second thing is I think you're being naive to say that giving them this quote unquote federal land that is 31%, whatever, is not hurting anybody, because as the previous caller said, with a $37 trillion national debt, the value of that land does, in spite of what your argument earlier, and that value does belong to the people. And just because the laws don't make it easy to claim that doesn't mean the laws can't be changed. And the law should take care of that national debt, that in itself, and cut spending, but that the federal government is, insanely bent on doing. Those just prove that. You got to make all those cuts. That would benefit everybody, including descendants of slaves, much more than giving them some property. Steve pointed out perfectly that giving them something, unless they have a cultural change, a cultural mindset, giving them anything, property doesn't matter. We've been doing that for 100 years.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying if we do this, I think there will be a cultural change, because they won't be inner city people surrounded in the blue bubble. They will be country people who have to deal with country things. They have to maintain trees and deal with nuisance animals. So they'll probably have to get like a rifle and learn how to shoot, and then they'll be in the NRA, and they'll pretty much just turn into regular rural people.
I just think that's a naive perspective.
It might be. It might be, Mark, because
the culture is
I know, but you're the fourth person to say that, so you're not alone in disagreeing with me on that point. So I'm reticent to say you're just wrong. I just disagree. Joseph Mesquite, go.
Hi, good afternoon, sir. Hey, you know what? If you took them 40 acres and built a shopping mall or a subdivision or even just a few apartment complexes, you would change the tax base for the entire area. And that would affect me and what I pay for taxes. So, yes, it does affect me.
That would help you then.
It would. No, my taxes would go up.
No. See, you would have land that's otherwise not being utilized come into commerce and come into the marketplace. So you would be expanding the tax base. So in order for, the state capital or DC to if they were doing the same amount of taxation, there would be more going into the public treasury.
I think you're being very naive. Besides, if reparations are only because of the repercussions of slavery, I mean, America has more black millionaires and billionaires, congressmen, CEOs, president of the United States. Just look at the NFL, the NBA, and half of the National Baseball League.
Yeah, that doesn't bother me. I don't care if Michael Jordan gets 40 acres. That'd be cool. Hang on, I'm going to take some more calls.
People are not being affected by slavery. People are being affected by their poor choices and the decisions they make in life.
That last sentence I totally agree with, too, but we can do both. Carl, Royce City, you're going to be the last word on this. Go.
Well, first off, I'm appalled at the fact that we're even having this discussion. I do not agree with reparations. I do not agree with giving anybody anything that's already been given everything all their life because they're just in a give me mentality.
But that ends that. There's no more handouts after this.
There's no way it ends that.
Well, that's part of the James Show reparations program.
Something else.
Yeah, in exchange for the 40 acres, there's no more handouts. So this does end that. Some people just sound bitter. 800-288-9227. Oh, I'm sorry. We're done with the show. Coming up next, the Mark Levin Show. That's going to do it for the James Show. When I get out of here, I'm putting up the podcast. So whenever you're spending time later listening to podcasts or goofing around on YouTube, look for our stuff. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. We got all that stuff. Got a lot of good videos and highlights up there in the podcast and video world. So just remember me next time you're goofing around on your phone, and you can enjoy some more James Show even when I'm not live. I'm James Parker. This has been the James Show, News Talk 820 and 93.3 FM WBAP.